I don't consider myself to be a great artist. I'm a good artist, certainly. I enjoy making art. Here's an art I've made. Here's another. This one's my favorite. I made this one too, and definitely didn't use this picture as my reference so that I didn't actually have to try and make it good myself. But sometimes, art isn't good. And it all has to start somewhere. You can't just be born with some innate skill to create the great works of Michelangelo and Leonardo and all the rest of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You have to start somewhere. And for me, it was this. Today we're going to be talking about this, The Adventures of Stickman. This is my comic book series that I made all the way back in 5th grade. You see, it all started when my friends and I would make comics, and they weren't actual comics in the traditional sense. They were called Bob Comics. And the premise was, it was a couple sentences where something would happen with this character Bob, and there'd be like a little drawing of a stick figure doing whatever the sentence said, and then he died at the end. Every single time. And I thought they were pretty funny at the time, and I decided to make my own. Obviously I couldn't use Bob, so I named them Larry Comics. And the premise was the same, albeit with my own twist. It was just my own stories of whatever I thought was cool. But once he left, he gave me ownership of Bob, and now Larry and Bob are both my characters. And I used them in a lot of different things. You know, they were schoolwork, they were stories I wrote, they were, original comic book characters. I drew them in the margins of my homework. All sorts of different things. And I loved them. They were awesome. So 5th grade comes around, and, I have friends who are making their own superhero comics with their own original characters. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. So I made Stickman. And I named him Stickman, ironically enough. It's kind of funny for the time. I can kind of get the joke I was going for. Most superheroes having man in the name. It's pretty on the nose, though. So we start with our main protagonist walking out of school, high school or college, I don't know. Just look at this depth perception, like playing the demo of Hyperbolica. Now, it's important to know that my tiny 5th grader brain stole a lot of its ideas from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, and the general ideas of Batman. Larry comes home, and what do you know? It's the scene from the first Spider-Man! Look, he's fixing the light bulb and everything! You've probably noticed right away that there is a severe lack of accuracy and consistency with not only the characters and environments, but also the comic panels. It's egregious. This will persist pretty much through the rest of the entire series, so buckle your butts up for that. There's some filler content, and after an awkward shower scene, not sure why my younger self chose to include that, but Larry leaves and immediately is forced to run back home because aliens, for some reason, literally rip up his entire home and abduct them all. Strangely enough, in a series of like 12 frames, Larry is stuck in a gas chamber, passes out, is determined dead, is dropped back into Earth's orbit, survives re-entry, and crashes into the side of a mountain. And what's crazy is his muscles instantly beef up. He brushes himself off, and he literally just pulls some cloth from somewhere and ties it on his head. Worst origin story ever. Well, except maybe yours. Ayo! Those alien designs, though. Stickman is now a fully fledged superhero, obviously, because he says he is. And his first act as Stickville's hero is to beat up random people in alleyways. They have the ever-elusive alien information MacGuffin, which makes perfect sense, since of course these random people have information on the aliens. Duh. So, in typical superhero fashion, Stickman ties this guy up and leaves him there just in case he needs them again. It's at this point that we discover that becoming a self-proclaimed superhero automatically manifests gadgets and skills in your person. He just has suction cups that allow him to climb up a building? Okay. He then just jumps off the building and lands safely. Okay, sure. Maybe the alien gas gave him more abilities than I originally let on. But what makes absolute zero sense is the fact that he was led to a temple in a city that I definitely made to resemble New York because Spider-Man influence. All superheroes are from New York or some version of New York, and you can't change my mind. He goes in deeper, and there's a guy frozen in ice. He thaws him out, and the guy immediately starts sharing his life story unprompted. And of course, the aliens are also after elusive information, but of course, this info is about attacking Earth. Which is weird since at this point, they've been to Earth at least twice? What else would they need to attack? Just do it. Suddenly, the aliens are coming back to the temple. An alarm went off or something. We get a short fight scene where Stickman beats them up, and now we're faced with the problem that they don't have a base. And the ice guy, whose name is Bob, but I never established that, has to come with them because he's been frozen for a long time. Long enough that he shouldn't exist anymore? So they travel up the mountain hole where Stickman fell from orbit, and Bob says he can give it a makeover. Okay, ye old man from dinosaur times, please, fill the room with modern superheroing technology. There's a weird intermission where I put a Star Wars bit I thought was hilarious at the time, but just comes off as awkward and unnecessary. So, one of the best parts is coming up. You know how every superhero has the thing where they gotta keep their identity secret, but it inevitably is revealed to the main characters? Well, we already have a kind of awkward setup for that kind of situation. All of the established family is dead? Kidnapped? It's unclear. And he has no friends except for Bob, and they've known each other for hours, max. Well, the big reveal is here. Stickman tells Bob that he feels a sense of loyalty from him since he helped him with the base, and straight up asks if he wants to be his sidekick. No build up, no big reveal, no accidentally falling into the role, just casually asks. And of course, Bob is all for it and just agrees without a second thought. You can tell 10-year-old me is really trying to speed up this superhero origin process. Then Stickman says that Bob needs training and needs to know his identity. So he just takes his mask off. He just takes it off. It's honestly such a hilarious scene. There's no tension, no apprehension, no discussion. They just yes and their way to being heroes. And Larry is really one to talk, saying that Bob needs training. I'm sorry, when did you learn how to fight crime and make gadgets and such? There's so little cohesion here, and I just love seeing how my young mind thought and just skipped over important details just to get to the fun parts. A montage plays where Bob trains and learns to fight. He also plays the Wii and carries Larry like Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. So apparently it's been 5 months of training, and we get yet another montage where Bob tries on different costumes to find his look. What's interesting here is you get to see even clearer how I wrote as a child, and still kinda write to this day, albeit a lot better. I've always written stories, reports, and essays as I went along, constantly going back, reading and editing, and trying to keep it all together. Well, to avoid actually having to plan ahead, every costume he tries on was either a joke or a reference, or just me throwing the pencil on paper to see what stuck. I did come up with a design I really liked, where he's wearing goggles and has like the tie in the back, but the rest was just filler garbage. And for some reason I was under the impression that all superheroes needed a symbol, and I drew one on the cover expecting to find some use for it somewhere in the story, retroactively. I really didn't, and I had to force its inclusion in the scene where they create one, and then it is never seen again. It's also really ugly, like most other things in the comic, but that's expected. And now we've gotten to the creation of Stickman's arch enemy, Cloud Man. What? That's not intimidating? Not scary? Doesn't send chills down your spine? Well, good. Because his origin is exactly the same as Sandman in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 3. Random criminal running from cops, goes into a restricted area, inability to spell played out as a joke, except this time, instead of falling into a pit, no, that'd be too similar. He gets on a helicopter during a lightning storm, gets struck by lightning, falls, and disappears entirely. Sure, That's original enough. How much effort do you want a 10-year-old to put into his stories? He's a child with next to no original thoughts, let him be. While his origin may not be completely original, his elevation as supervillain is... No, it's pretty much the same as Stickman. He doesn't have a moment of discovering his powers. There's no heartfelt reason for him doing crimes. He just gets powers and chooses violence. Same, Cloudman. Same. I'm thirsty. Recording's hard. Cloudman is discovered robbing a bank with a literal rocket launcher, which means that Stickman has to stop him. But they have to make a cool entrance first. Honestly, this is a decent attempt at humor. There are a lot of attempts at humor, which is probably funnier to my younger self, but it's not done well. It's kind of like the
She gonna do superhero landing. Wait for it.
joke in Deadpool. They have two heroes run into the bank, break a window because it's cool, and confront the robber. They have a short fight where Stickman quickly finds that he has some ability to make himself untouchable. He basically bodies the heroes and makes his escape, forcing them to give chase. They run over rooftops, which is somehow fast enough to keep up with a runaway armored truck with no regards for traffic. You can also tell that this is where I made the switch from a standard number 2 pencil to a mechanical pencil for thinner and sharper lines. Once they land on the truck and defy the laws of physics, another gadget manifests in Stickman's pockets. A thematically appropriate ninja star with a rope attached. And he uses it to get back on the truck. He's Spider-Man, okay? He combined Spider-Man's webs with Batman's batarangs and is now his own thing. This wasn't a conscious decision. I just thought this would be cool and wasn't aware of the subconscious influence that these two heroes truly had on me. So they steer the car into the river, and Cloudman disappears, leaving the two heroes behind, defeated. And this is the part where I really throw a curveball at the reader, because Larry and Bob get into an argument about how their first encounter went. And like a middle school couple who thinks being in the same project group as another girl is the same as cheating, they choose to break it off and stop being partners, destined to be rival heroes forever. And also just like a middle school couple, Bob finds the nearest girl in his project group and chooses to date her instead. And by girl, I mean Cloudman. Like literally, Cloudman was waiting outside of the cave for Bob to come out. How he knew where it was, or that they were arguing, was never explained. But he does the whole Darth Vader Sith thing and recruits Stickkick to his side to rule the galaxy or whatever, his father and son. He's not his dad. That's not canon. That didn't happen. It did happen. They had the conversation, but they're not related in any form at all. I could make that a thing, though. I could retroactively apply that through time travel or something stupid in the fourth one. I could do it. Because after all, one argument is all it takes for someone to turn to the dark side and commit crimes. This is also the first time Cloudman is actually referred to by a villain name. And no, he was never given a real name. His purpose was to be evil, not to have a personality. Cloudman wants Stickkick to help him. With what? It isn't said. In fact, the interaction has no substance. There's no incentive, there's no motivation other than, you argued, let's be evil. They just yes and their way to the plot movement. But, in order to prove himself as a worthy sidekick, Stickkick has to rob a bank. The same bank, mind you, that he robbed earlier that day. So, he breaks into this bank that has no security, no emergency services, and didn't even close to make repairs for earlier that day. That's capitalism for you. We have yet another awkwardly short scene of Larry taking a shower. Again, don't know why I chose to include that. This one's a bit more tasteful, but also like, what's the point? Anyway, he quickly arrives at the bank, surprised that his middle school boyfriend has moved on and is now dating Emily. Well, not really dating, they're just talking right now, but everybody knows they're a thing. Anyway, we get a break from the action and follow Cloudman up into outer space? Because apparently the power of weather means you can just go into space. Not only does he go into space, but he locates the aliens and can communicate with them. I gave them their own language and everything, and this common criminal with superpowers that he's had, I guess for 5 months, lore-wise, but like, he's had them for like a couple frames, and he can just talk to them as if he was raised by them. And it takes no effort to convince them to join him. Just their common hatred of Stickman, and so, like before, they yes-and their way to move the plot forward. I just want to point out that Cloudman mentions that the aliens couldn't beat Stickman, and that he also couldn't beat Stickman. But in every encounter they've had, Cloudman has nearly completely bodied the heroes and escaped successfully. If anything, Cloudman has been doing really well against the duo. Regardless, Cloudman returns to the fight, beats the crap out of Stickman, and hucks him halfway across the city. I don't really think Cloudman ever used his powers to their maximum potential. Speaking of his powers, Cloudman literally turns Stick Kick into a cloud. He can make anyone into a cloud, and he just never thought to make his enemies disappear. You know, just poof, just blow them away. It would be so easy. But fighting is cooler, so I get it. Understand. They fly to where Stickman lands, and conveniently, he's in a large pit where there's an alien spaceship waiting for him. Cloudman drops Stick Kick next to Stickman, and he hesitates to kill him for some reason. Literally, there's no reason for him to hesitate. Maybe he remembers the good old times of training or whatever, but it isn't made clear. The only thing that stops him from finishing Stickman is that Stickman chooses to let Stick Kick finish the job and live with his consequences, which is kind of a decent attempt at that scene where the hero refuses to fight back, and you know, the villain like can't kill him because if they're not fighting, then like what's the point? Kind of like the end of Captain America Winter Soldier, but this situation is set up completely wrong. There's no reason for it. There's no payoff. There's no build up, except for, you know, 10-year-old me being like, I want them to be friends again. So Cloudman sicks his alien army after the heroic pair, because every villain needs an army of fodder for the heroes to slap with their nuts just for exciting fight action, and somehow they can handle a whole army with just the two of them. And you know what's interesting? Stick Kick doesn't have any powers. Stickman doesn't either, arguably, but at least you could kind of make the case for a Captain America type deal. And I suppose you could argue that the torture that Bob went through could have given him superpowers, but he doesn't even have a transformation scene, so I guess technically he just doesn't have powers. It's at this point that Stickman notices a crane and heads towards it to destroy the aliens, leaving Stick Kick to defend himself, like a jerk. There's a whole bit about him being distracted by an iPad, but this script is getting kind of long and we gotta wrap this up. Stickman moves the crane, which tosses the spaceship onto the aliens and explodes and kills them all, while Cloudman flies up once again and confronts the two remaining heroes for the final showdown. Also, the crane self-destructs for some reason. This is it. The final confrontation, where the fate of the whole world is in the balance, where the victory of good or evil can change the fate of the entire course of history. And, he just pulls out a new device that freezes Cloudman, and they win. Well, I'm glad those aliens gave him the power of Deus Ex Machina. Larry and Bob make up here and become partners and friends again. And the story ends. Right there. Unsatisfyingly. Of course, after rereading it as a kid, I realized the dude in the alleyway at the beginning was just left there to die. So I decided to take it upon myself to write an epilogue explaining what happened to him, and inadvertently made the very first end credit scene. Man, I was doing it way before Marvel. I should sue. Hang on. Oh, never mind. They beat me by 2 years. Anyway, to sum it up, this guy is saved by two superheroes from Eddsworld, a web comic / YouTube series that we used to watch in 5th grade. And they're still making videos today, albeit with a different cast. You can go find out more about that. I'll link it in the description. The two heroes from them are Captain State the Obvious and Superguy. But then he somehow ends up at the fight between Cloudman and Stickman, and instead of Cloudman being frozen, This guy actually catches the electronic ice cube freezer and is not only frozen, but is also mistaken for Cloudman, despite the fact that Cloudman did get frozen a bit, and both Larry and Bob have seen Cloudman in person. And they didn't even think this guy looked different at all. They just took him to jail without question, setting up a new villain and a sequel. Although, to be fair, all the stick people kind of do look the same, so I don't really blame them. In the end, though, the story is relatively short and simple, and while I enjoyed writing it, I don't really enjoy going back and rereading it. Maybe it's the art style. That looks like it was done by a child with little to no background art, terribly written plot and resolution with many plot holes, or just the fact that I prefer to read the third one, since it's way better near the end. Either way, this character is one that I really like, even if all the depth he amounts to is the second dimension. Overall, the story does follow basic hero plot points as understood by a 10-year-old, and I think it really hits all the main ideas. It sticks to old tropes a bit too much and doesn't experiment enough, and when all the mystery is in what happens and why it happens, I think your story needs reworked. But in all seriousness, this was made by me as a kid, and I like to keep it around. I enjoy to reread my old creations, and old stories are fun to look back on no matter how cringe they are. And, you know, sometimes I still mess around writing the story for the third one, because in the back of my mind, it was never finished. You know, I took long breaks after middle school because I didn't have time. I hit serious writing blocks. Serious, like several year long writing blocks for the plot of the third one, and it's still not done. I'm still hitting a couple writing blocks even now, the few times I go back to draw a couple panels and write the story. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun, going back and reminiscing and explaining the story and just sharing it. I really enjoy doing that. And I also really enjoy, you know, seeing how I used to think and write as a kid. You know, there was a lot less cohesion, a lot less planning and plot, and it was a lot more just doing it for fun. Nothing really made sense, but it was fun to do, and it was fun to look back on. And there is a sequel, and a third one, as I've already mentioned, which, if this video does get traction, and if people do want to see the next two, I can do those as well. I actually kind of want to do them after doing this first one. And I also think it'd be interesting to look at other stories that I've made, whether they be comic books or just something I've written, or maybe just ideas, concepts that I had that I wrote down that I never actually did anything with. I think that'd be a lot of fun. So if you guys want to see more of that, hit like, hit subscribe, comment what you want to see, and I can make a lot more of these videos. So, till next time, bye.